Hello, everybody. Welcome to Approaching the Pros, a college football-based production where we look at different college players from the time they ever even sign to play for a college football team and the paths that they'll go on throughout their college careers as they get ready to approach the pros themselves. I'm Andrew Woodruff, your host, and today I want to start sharing some of the work that I've been doing in the background on things I think are very important for those of us that play fantasy football. I've been in fantasy football leagues for over a decade at this point, of course, starting off with the NFL side like everybody else. And it just slowly developed to where I ended up falling in love with the format, Devy football, and then that expanded over to C2C, which has just been a phenomenal blast. C2C, real quick, is just a college fantasy football league combined with the NFL fantasy football league. So, of course, that's really helpful. Now, if you want to get that early edge to do things like what I'm going to share with y'all. Approaching the pros, the whole purpose of this is just again to look at those college players from the moment before they take a college snap and being able to start identifying which players can have the most value before everybody knows who they are, right? Before they blow up, everybody wants them. The goal is to try and get as early an edge as possible. And that's what I've been doing. I've been using my background as a math teacher on the high school level, my experience as a defensive football coach. And I've just been looking at these things and coming up with some systems, some ideas, some models that I think kind of help get us that early edge. And so for this first episode of Approaching the Pros back, I was wanting to go into the models, but then I kept hearing everybody this offseason. It felt like every time I turned on a podcast, listen to a video or something, they brought up the idea of the year one zero theory with the work from Campus of Canton. It's a phenomenal idea. The process plays out beautifully when it comes to receivers, but that's all that ever got discussed. And I get it. Quarterbacks, tight ends, they always take at least a year, it feels like, for most of them to really start showing out, right? And so it's hard to test year one zero theory on them because, again, especially nowadays, quarterbacks love to sit. Tight ends, one of the hardest position there is. So normally there is that building year here. But that still leaves one question for fantasy purposes. What about running backs? And I kept hearing, oh, it can't matter. It can't matter for running backs. And I had to find out for myself, should there be a year one zero theory for running backs? And so that's what I want to introduce today with everybody. I want to talk about my version of the year one zero theory, but for running backs. So we're going to, again, call it the year one zero running back model. The way I did this was I took the data that Campus of Canton has on their website and I downloaded it and created this test. Again, let's start with the parameters first. I couldn't look at every single running back there is from JUCO all the way up to the 5 star. So since I know for Devy purposes and especially for C2C purposes, most of the running backs taken are going to be 3 stars, 4 stars, or 5 stars. That's where I decided this theory needs to focus. For the seasons that I wanted to use in this sample size, I focused on any freshman running back going all the way back to 2012 up through the season 2021. That way, at least those running backs had a chance to play their freshman year and at least had a chance to now get drafted by the NFL with the data from this most recent NFL draft being complete. That gave me a really good sample size of 1,063 running backs to work with. Now, out of those running backs, 145 of them did get drafted. That's not great odds. You'll see that on the next page, but it comes out to about 13.6% chance. If you taken any running back after their first year, picking one and hoping that they get drafted, and not everybody is going to sit there and go, yeah, that's great. I picked a running back that got drafted, but they went round 7, right? We'll get into that just a little bit later. But just again, the odds of getting drafted itself is a very big step for us. So again, I needed to find something that could help boost that 13.6% chance. And so that's where the year one zero running back theory is going to be used. We break it down into 5 parts. The first part, can they at least get 20 rushes? The second part, can they at least get 100 rushing yards? Again, we like our running backs to be involved in the passing game as well. And so I also looked at, well, what about 5 receptions? Can they at least get 5 receptions that first year that they're in college? Can they at least take those catches and get 30 receiving yards? And then, of course, we like touchdowns. Can they get at least 2 offensive touchdowns or more? If they hit any of these marks or got more, I gave them credit for that. If they failed to get that part, of course, they didn't get credit. And I just graded it, hey, 0 out of 5 all the way to 5 out of 5. How many of these things can each running back get? And so that gave us this information right here. If I take this data set, again, remember it's 1,063 players. I already said that 145 of them got drafted, which was 13.6% chance that you could pick a running back getting drafted after that first year. Well, looking at the sample after the data was collected and it was sorted and filtered, you had 209 running backs hit all 5 metrics. They hit the rushes, receiving yards, rushing yards, receptions, and the offensive touchdowns. Of those 209 running backs, they hit all 5 parts. 77 of them went on to get drafted. If I was to sit there and tell you, hey, pick out of these 209 players instead, that increased your odds of just getting a player drafted all the way up to 36.8%. I mean, we're talking about almost a triple in our odds of just getting a player drafted. That is a huge jump. If we sit there and look at the running backs who got 4 out of 5, that gave us a data set of 80. And of them, 15 of them went on to get drafted, which again, about 18.75% chance of getting drafted out of that group. That's still better than 13.6. For those running backs who got 3 out of 5, you had 114 of them complete that. Only 20 of them get drafted. Again, staying very close to the previous group at 17.54% chance of getting drafted. The odds now start to dip below. If the running back only hit 2 out of the 5, that was 72 of them. 8 of them went on to get drafted. Now we're dropping below that 13. We're down to 11% chance of getting drafted. The 1 out of 5 group was 60 running backs. Only 2 of those running backs got drafted. Now you're talking about 3% chance of getting drafted. And for the running backs who were not able to hit any of these 5 metrics, there was 528 of them. 23 of them went on to get drafted. We're talking about less than 5% chance still that these running backs go on to get drafted. And I know some people are going to say, well, some running backs decide the redshirt, right? Just kind of like any other player can choose to do as a freshman. That's fine. I know redshirts, you can still play up to 4 games. We're talking about 20 rushes, so that comes out to be 5 rushes a game. 100 rushing yards, we're talking about 25 yards per game. Some of these players are supposed to be great athletes. They should be able to handle a workload of 5 touches per game on average. And they probably can break a good run loose if we're getting thrown in, at the end of blowouts and stuff, like Georgia's leading or something like that. You should be able to go in there and get enough work done across those 4 games and still preserve that red shirt while passing this test at a much higher rate. So I know we can look at that and immediately, well, hey, let's look at your data set based off recruiting ranks, right? 5 stars is supposed to be better than 4 stars. 4 stars is supposed to be better than 3 stars. They're ranked that way for a reason with the recruiting services. And that does kind of hold true right here. So in this next part, I broke it down by where they were in the recruiting services. We had a sample of 35 5 stars. Again, it's a little small, but we can start taking away some information here. 14 running backs got drafted out of the 23 5 stars that hit 5 out of 5 on their freshman season. Again, that's better odds than anything I've already showed you. 14 out of 23, we're talking about over 50% chance of just getting drafted. That's very helpful to have. Now, for the other categories, we only had 2 running backs that hit 4 out of 5. One of them went on to get drafted, so it's hard to say a lot. The takeaways there with such a small sample size, again, we can say the same thing with the group that hit 3 of the 5 parts of my test. Only one of them went on to get drafted. Same is true for the 2 out of 5. Only one of the 3 went on to get drafted. There's not enough information to really take away from that, but there will be something I can show you in a second. However, if we look down at the bottom, there was 4 running backs that were 5 stars that didn't get any of the 5 metrics, right? I can't help if an injury happens. It's just part of the process. But of those 4 running backs, only one of them, Zamir White, ends up going on to get drafted. Every other 5 the other 3 5-stars didn't get drafted at all by the NFL. Now, there's not a lot of 5-star running backs anymore, so let's look over at the 4-stars. This is where most of us are gonna be looking for David purposes and a good chunk for C2C purposes at the top of our drafts. There's 218 of those running backs. 77 of them were able to get all 5 parts of my metric. 35 of them go on to get drafted. Again, now it's almost the exact same as what I was just talking about the 5-stars. You have almost a 50% chance of getting drafted if you can just hit those metrics and you're a 4-star. The 5-star, again, it's slightly over 50. If you hit 4 out of the 5, we had a group of 6 running backs get drafted out of the 15 4-star running backs that hit those 4 parts. We start seeing the dip as we continue. There was 33 running backs that hit 3 of the 5 metrics. Only 9 of those get on to get drafted. Of the 16 who hit 2 out of the 5 parts, only 3 get drafted. 1 out of 5 is much worse. We only had 2 of the 10 of those running backs get drafted. 0 out of 5, we're talking about 11 of the 77 get drafted. However, again, we're only talking about 35 players on the 5-stars, 218 players out of the 4-stars. Especially for C2C guys or anyone that's want to play that format of college fantasy, we still have to dip our toes into the 3-star group. This data set I think is fairly helpful. We have 810 3-star running backs in this sample to work with. 118 of them were able to go 5 for 5 as a freshman. 28 of those 118 3-stars get drafted. We see a dip, obviously, in the 5-stars and the 4-stars right before it. That dip continues. 4 out of 5, you're talking about 8 running backs out of the 63 that hit that. For the 3 out of 5, very similar. You got 10 running backs out of the 78 that hit that. 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5, and 0 out of 5, it gets much worse. 2 out of 5, we're talking about 4 running backs making it to the NFL out of 53 sample group. For 1 out of 5, only 1 running back got selected out of the 51 that met that part. Out of the 0 out of 5 group, we're only talking about 11 of the 447 3-star running backs that were not able to even pass those 5 parts, any of the 5 parts, their first year in college. Well, let's look that a little further. Right, I keep saying getting drafted, and I already said a 7th-round running back isn't really helping us for fantasy purposes on the NFL side, normally. Now, if I was to break it down, let's do our, again, 5-stars, 4-stars, and 3-stars. But let's take that draft capital and let's go a little bit better. Let's say top 50, top 100, top 150, top 200, right? That helps us get a better picture. Top 50, we almost basically have a 1st-round running back or majority of the 2nd round. Heavy draft capital by NFL team probably says they've got a good shot of being the guy. Top 100, at least we know they're a day 1 or day 2 pick. Top 150, okay, well now you start getting some of those early day 3 picks in there, which with the way the NFL looks recently, those picks could possibly still be relevant. Top 200 not giving you much hope there at that point. And then drafted along with the bottom of each of these little charts basically goes back to what I was just showing you at the bottom of the previous page. So let's look at those 5-stars again. I'm not going to break down every single one of these parts, but if we look, the 5-stars again had just over a 51% chance of getting drafted if they were a 5-star in any category. However, if you take the 5-stars who were in the 2 out of 5, the 1 out of 5, or the 0 out of 5 group, small sample, we're only talking about 7 players, their odds of going in the top 100 were much lower. We're only talking about 1 of those 7 kids win the top 100. The odds of them being relevant for the fantasy community dropped significantly. However, if we go over to the 3 out of 5, the 4 out of 5, and especially the 5 out of 5 group, we're talking about just over 33% chance that they go in the top 50. Those are much different odds from 33% chance of getting drafted or 1 out of 7 going in the top 100, which is much lower than 33% chance. Now we're talking about over a 33% chance of those top 2 groups going top 50, right? We're talking about like 9 out of 25. That's really helpful for us. Top 100, it's almost a 50-50 chance. Top 150, now it is slightly over. Well, no, it's probably right at a 50-50 at that point. Top 150. So you're talking about out of these 25 players, there's almost a 50-50 chance that those players went in the top 150 picks in the draft. That's a much better floor that we're okay with. That's super helpful to know, not only for, hey, this guy produced early, so probably continues producing for your college fantasy team on the C2C side of that, but it's probably also going to translate if you're in Devy or if you want to look further on into Dynasty, where they help us on the NFL side. For the 4 stars, the odds again, remember they dropped. So out of the 4 stars, almost basically, we'll say 30% of the 218 4 stars get drafted in general. The odds were less than 15% chance of getting drafted at all if you were in the 1 out of 5 group or the 0 out of 5 group. Only, I believe it's only one of them out of the, 86 players right there went top 100. That's not great odds. I wouldn't want to bet on the outlier there. Again, less than 15% getting drafted. Only one of the 86 players going in the top 100. Right? It's less than 6% chance that any of them went top 150. So now you're looking at a late day 3 running back, and you really want to bet on an outlier there. And of course, outliers exist. We all know that, but that's just a really big risk to take. If we look on the upper side of it, the 5 out of 5 and 4 out of 5 group, at least there is a little bit of hope right there. There's a just over 10% chance for the perfect group, the 5 out of 5, of going top 50. Going top 100, okay, well, the 5 out of 5 group had a 22% chance. The 4 out of 5 group now at least has a 13% chance. Those odds are at least better of going much higher in the draft versus the players who struggled on this test of even getting drafted. Ultimately, again, we see you want to be on the left side of this. Technically, especially on the 3 stars. Again, we have a giant sample here, so we really got some historical data to fall back on here. Again, while the 118 5 out of 5 perfect 3 stars that first year, we only had a 2.5% chance of getting drafted. We know 3 stars is a long shot getting drafted in the top 50. Their odds went up to just about 6% and going top 100 if they hit the criteria, all 5 categories. Top 150, though, we do see a jump right here. And this is where we get a little bit of hope because, again, in today's NFL, we're okay understanding that some of our running backs are probably going to be early day 3 guys. We don't want it, but if they land in the correct spot, they can still thrive. It jumped up to a 14% chance, right? So that 14% chance is looking pretty good if you compare it to, again, even the 4 stars who hit 0 of the 5 metrics or 1 out of the 5 metrics. So we start seeing, again, a very simple theme here. We want running backs who hit the 20 rush threshold, the 100 rushing yard threshold, the 5 receptions, the 30 receiving yards, and the 2 offensive touchdowns. Even across 4 games, that's manageable. But let's look. Let me give you the list right here of the players that were drafted in this data sample that hit 0 out of the 5 and 1 out of the 5. And let's look and see if you're uncomfortable with these names. Rashad Penny, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd, Dante Foreman, CJ Procise, Tony Pollard, Deshaun Haskins, Wayne Gallman, Audric Estime, Paul Perkins, Quadri Allison, Zamir White, Kyron Williams, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Jordan Wilkins, Chris Rodriguez Jr., Gary Brightwell, Travis Homer, Rodney Anderson, Mike Weber, David Williams, Lou Nichols, and Jerome Ford. That's the guys who didn't hit any of the 5 metrics, right? We're talking about 22 running backs that ended up getting drafted, even though their first year they did nothing. Now, some of that is injury related for some of these guys. Some of that is just they just didn't touch the field. That's not a very inspiring list. I know some people will gravitate toward Howard Williams, who just went off this year. Rashad Penny, they'll look back to and say, oh, well, he had good stretches. Zamir White, hey, he just had a decent stretch this last year. Or they'll even point to the 2024 favorites, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Audric Estime, Tony Pollard in the past. I mean, they'll look to those guys. But that's the guys who are at least lucky enough to get drafted, right? There was a giant list that I just referred to under each category, 5 stars, 4 stars, and 3 stars, that weren't so lucky to even get drafted. You're betting on outliers already. The 1 out of 5 group, there was only 2 of them that even get drafted. We got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had a brief stretch of relevance there, and Dexter Williams. Those are not good groups to be in, and we see that, right? We can listen to this or watch this and understand that's not what we want. So let's look at some of the players, though, who hit some of the more parts of our freshman test. The 5 out of 5 group is phenomenal, right? I'm not going to read through all, I believe, 77 of these names right here, but I'll give some of the quick early ones. Saquon Barkley, Fournette, Bijan, CMC, Gurley, Gibbs, Jacobs, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Michelle, Chubb, Swift, Javonte, Breece Hall, Ronald Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, right? Like the list, it looks phenomenal if you stay on the 5 out of 5 group. The 4 out of 5 group, there's some flashes in there, of course. You got Derrick Henry. Darius Geis was somebody that everybody wanted for a while, it felt like. Other issues led to that not happening. Blake Corum's in there, James Conner, Damian Pierce, Jalen Wright. These are all some guys that could or have been very useful for our fantasy team still. 3 out of 5 group, the list gets a little less inspiring. I'll just go over some of the top guys that's been in this. Zeke Elliott, Kenneth Walker III, Miles Sanders, A.J. Dillon, Kendre Miller. Zach Moss was getting hyped for a little bit. Aaron Jones has been a great outlier example right here. Pacheco. So we do see some guys in 3 out of 5 groups still succeed. This 2 out of 5 group, though, it's a little nervous because you got your 2024 running back 1 in this group. Jonathan Brooks, Damian Harris, Izzy Abakanda in the past, Kenneth Gainwell in the past. Like, there's a couple more in there, but none of them, besides Brooks at this point, is really getting hype. So we need to consider that. And this is talking about the dynasty side of things, right? Imagine if I could have been able to tell or share this, or we knew this after their first year in college. This test is already starting to separate those who we want versus the risk. And so even if we break it down by conference, right? We take the original Power 5 before the Pac-12 just exploded this past year. You've got the ACC. You still got your top guys at the top: Gibbs, Etienne, Javonte, Cook, Akers. The 4 out of 5, at least you got James Conner sitting right there. The 3 out of 5, you got Kenneth Walker III, A.J. Dillon. The Big 12, you still got your top guys at the top: Bijan, Brees, Montgomery, Zach Evans at TCU before other things led to him ultimately not being what we hoped he might be. You got Kendre Miller in a 3 out of 5 group there, right? There's some potential. For the Big 10, 5 out of 5, we're talking about Saquon, JT, Dobbins. Charbonnet's been hyped in the past before. The 4 out of 5 group, we got Blake Corum. We'll see what that looks like in the Rams backfield this year. 3 out of 5, you still got Zeke, Sanders, Pacheco. Pac-12's not nearly as promising as the rest, but at the top, we saw Christian McCaffrey, Ronald Jones II, Royce Freeman, Bryce Love. I mean, those guys weren't bad. But CMC, of course, we know what he is. 3 out of 5, you at least got Zach Moss sitting there, Benjamin. If you had to grab these guys, maybe you could have flipped them when their value was up more. For the SEC, your 5 out of 5 groups, several of these. You got Fournette, Gurley, Jacobs, Najee, Michelle, Chubb, Swift, and I can just keep going through the list of 4 out of great guys. We're again talking about Henry, Geis, guys like that. 3 out of 5, a little less inspiring, but that's all right. We still got guys like Drake, Ron Robinson Jr., Kevin Harris, Chase McClellan, Keelan Robinson. Notice a lot of the Bama running backs fell in that group. We know it's been a logjam for years there, so that's not really surprising, but it is something we need to at least note. Independent is a little different. Anybody that was independent or G5, right, just not in the Power 5 conference, their list doesn't look as inspiring. And that should, I guess, be expected. 5 out of 5, we're talking about Singletary, Spears, Kareem Hunt at the top, Alexander Madison, Jamal Williams in the past, Marlon Mack. We got Kamani Vidal, who I know have been seeing some hype pieces on Twitter about him. 4 out of 5 didn't really work out. 3 out of 5, besides Aaron Jones, also hasn't really worked out so far for us. And so, again, I'm bringing up everything that I have from the sample to show us the historics. But let's turn that over. So let's look at current college players and how that might reflect for those that are playing Devy, those that are looking ahead in Dynasty, and for those who have got to make some choices on C2C. So let's start with our 5 stars. There's not a lot. I took the 2022 season, the 2023 season, and I tried grabbing any of the 2021 guys who weren't drafted. So 5 stars. We know there's not a lot of 5 stars out there. You had Nick Singleton, CJ Baxter, Ruben Owens, and Trevion Henderson all hit all 5 parts of the test as freshmen. It's a really good, encouraging sign that these guys are going to go on to be considered being worth drafting at the next level. The only other 5-star running back is Justice Haynes, again, kind of falling into Alabama logjam theory, getting it 3 out of 5. It's good he saw time on the field, especially when you had 2 of the older guys, Roydell Williams and Jace McClellan, ahead of him already. That's a good sign, especially, again, we also had Jam Miller there too. If we were to go down to the 4 stars, I'm not reading off all of this. It's a much bigger group. So I do recommend if you're listening to this on a podcast, just jump over to YouTube real quick, Approaching the Pros, and watch this. Go find this table that you're looking at. But I'll call off at least some of the big names that we need to know. For the 5 out of 5 group, these are a lot of the guys that get toward the top of the rankings. You got Jaden Ott, Katron Allen, Darius Taylor, Trevor Etienne, Mark Fletcher Jr., Marion Hampton, Parker Jenkins. I just saw a piece about him. Caden Fagan, Ollie Gordon, Caleb Jackson down at LSU, Raheem Sanders, Donovan Edwards, Phil Maffa for some people. Like that's your group of 4 stars who went perfect as freshmen on this very minimum test. They still have a really good odds now of moving on to the next level. Your 4 out of 5 group is a little less inspiring, but you do got Barnes at Oklahoma. You got Michael Allen, Ramon Brown. Not all these guys are going to really work out, but their odds have been much higher than some of these others. 3 out of 5 group, we're talking about Dallin Hayden right there. Jordan James of Oregon, Branson Robinson of Georgia, Jam Miller of Alabama again, Trayon Webb down at Florida, Roderick Robinson II, the Georgia kid, who has been very highly ranked. Again, the 3 out of 5 group is risky, right? We saw it was kind of that teetering point on the scale, so be aware of the risk there. The 2 out of 5 group, there's everybody's hype guy from last year, Cam Seldon of Tennessee. That's a very dangerous place to be right there. The 1 out of 5 group, Gavin Sawchuk's really the top one there. And then you had LJ Johnson Jr., who stayed on people's ranks way too high for a long time, even though he didn't really produce much that first year. And that looks like it's been a sign of what his track or his pathway has been since then. For the 0 out of 5 group, I'm not going to call off all of these names. There's a lot on here. But we'll just throw off some of the top ones on there. You got Dante Dowdle. You got Richard Young over at Bama. You got Jaden Blue at Texas. Let's throw him in there. Trevante Citizen. Yes, that's who I was looking for. He was a guy that still got hyped after that first year. People bought in, and they just like to point to, oh, well, he was hurt that first year. Well, look what that does. It puts them behind. The second year, they might not be playing full 100%. And now you're betting on a guy by year three. Hopefully, the staff has not over recruited his position and brought in somebody else. They've not got anybody out of the transfer portal now. And you just really want to betting on a profile from high school. These are things we've got to consider and keep in mind. The 3 stars, again, the guys that we really like that are 3 stars, we're mostly on this first side on the left over here, the 5 out of 5 group. Quinshawn Judkins at the top, Ashton Genty of Boise State, Jaheim White, West Virginia, Abba Osama III, right, Iowa State kid, LJ Martin, BYU got some love a little bit. LaQuinton Allen, yes, that's what I was trying to find right there. The Syracuse running back, Devin Neal, Montrell Johnson down in Florida right now, Jarquez Hunter. Like the guys that people like to hype put out as freshmen. They did what they needed to get on the field and start putting some production out there. The 4 out of 5 group, I mean, we can kind of scan through this. You got Damian Martinez, CJ Donaldson, Jonah Coleman, some of the better names there. If you can look at Boise State's backup running back, DeBar, I mean, he's already a 4 out of 5 as well. It's a good sign to come if the starter looks like they're about to move on to the NFL, especially for that program. It works out well. 3 out of 5 group, I mean, we got Iowa's running back, Caleb Johnson at the top. You got Dylan Sampson in Tennessee. He at least was 3 out of 5. Something to consider when you start thinking about that Tennessee backfield. TJ Harden, I know he's a guy that's been mentioned this offseason for UCLA. I mean, there's some risk now we're starting to get into here. The 2 out of 5 group's not really inspiring if you want to look through this. There's no names that really stand out as somebody who's getting a lot of buzz anymore. The 1 out of 5 group, again, not really inspiring if you want to look through this and see anybody there. The 0 out of 5 group, I wasn't even willing to put everybody on there, but I'll go over some I got marked at the top. You got Barnes, Minnesota's Zach Evans, Kayjon Brown, I believe, Louisville. Apologies if I messed up his name. Makai Hughes, Dunlap, Jamarian Wilcox, I believe, is over at Kentucky, right? Like Caleb Hicks. Just, again, I wouldn't even want to put all these on here. I've got it marked at the bottom. There's 178 other players from 2021, 2022, and 2023. 3-star running backs who just did not get on the field and produce anything, it feels like, that first year. That's the risk we're running right here. And so, again, for this first episode, instead of me jumping into the high school models that I have that really start showing the players we need to consider before they take a snap, I just really wanted to put this out there because I believe the year 1 zero theory is very useful for receivers. But based off this study, it seems like the year 1 zero theory needs to start being considered for running backs as well. So again, I'll go over that one more time. It's a 5-part test. We're looking for true freshman running backs to hit at least 20 rushes, 100 rushing yards, 5 receptions, 30 receiving yards, and just 2 offensive touchdowns. The more they hit those 5 parts and pass those 5 parts on the test, it looks like we can see a much better pathway for those kids as they start to approach the pros. So I appreciate those who've taken the time to watch this. I love doing this stuff right here. So if you would love to keep watching more of this, see more of this, share it, spread it. If you want to get one of these 0 out of 5, 1 out of 5 guys, send it to your enemy, right? Hopefully that makes them lower the value of whatever guy you're trying to acquire. Maybe send it to your friend who asked a question. Hey, should I take this guy who went 5 out of 5 on the freshman year? Right? This is a useful information to know. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of it with you. So again, if you ever have any questions, you want to hit me up about anything, my name's Andrew Woodruff. Again, my Twitter, or X as it's called now, handle is @_Debbie Scout. Approaching the Pros also has a Twitter page. It's @Approaching Pros. So there's no V in the middle of it. But I hope you're able to take away from this. I hope this is a good, helpful starting point for you, especially for those of us in the summer who are doing C2C drafts. This might start helping you decide between two different running backs. Till next time, keep grinding the stats, keep watching the film, and good luck as we continue searching for these future legends in football. Have a good one.